Hi, welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me.
Now that's Richard Dawkins, but I'm Rob Penzak, one of your hosts, and with me today is
I'm David Tamayo. I'm president of Hispanic Americans Free Thinkers, and we also have a very special guest this first half of the show, author Linda Lascola, and we'll talk a little bit more about her after maybe we can do some news,
right,
some announcements.
Quick news and announcement, and then we'll get back to that. So the first thing we want to talk about is just a little news about something that came out of the Supreme Court that was a little bit surprising to some of us. David, you want to tell us a couple details? And we'll talk about
Jump in, but as I understand it, the Little Sisters of the Poor, which is a nuns organization, opposed the Obamacare and asked for a they asked for
an injunction.
Injunction, exactly. That's the word I was looking for. So they said they should be exempt from the law. They appealed after appeal. They got rejected. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and Sonia Sotomayor, who accidentally happens to be a Catholic, decided that there should be an injunction for the nuns to have. And there's a picture of Sonia Sotomayor, someone that I admire greatly. But
right, this is a very liberal justice appointed by Obama, is why some of this was so surprising.
Exactly. And so now the reason the Obama administration has rejected her claim is that, their claim is that they are exempt. The only thing they have to do is sign a little piece of paper and self-exempt and say, we're exempt from this, and that's it.
We're saying we're a religious organization, therefore we want to take advantage of that exemption you're giving religious organizations, which seems utterly reasonable. The secular community really trying to make this work for people that don't want to give out contraceptives.
And their response was, well, it's the third party that is making us, do this, which is not true either, because the third party is a religious insurance company that is also exempt. So it's really a weak test. It's really seen as just fluff, just trying to make noise and trying to erode at Obamacare and at that law because of the contraception. But they're already getting all the exemptions. Religious organizations don't have to do any of that. They can let their nuns get pregnant if they want to. But that's how it is.
Right. And what's important also is it's not just the nuns that are affected. That women throughout the country that work at whatever organization, if you want reproductive care, you should be able to have it. And the Obama administration has made it very easy for that to happen. So this really seems like a religious organization going out of their way to make sure it doesn't work so they can complain about it.
Well, now this thing is sitting on Sotomayor's lap waiting for a decision for her, or she can send it to the rest of the justices. Now, would you care to guess how many justices are Catholic?
I guess it's 25% roughly to follow with our population statistics.
Yeah, the population is 25%, but of the 9 justices, right. 6 are Catholic.
Right.
So what's that, 2/3 or something?
Yeah. So you have to wonder, where you get a very liberal justice making this decision that seems, just.
Well, I guess in another show we can talk about, whether Catholic judges and Catholics, is their first duty to the law or to their religion. Right. It's something to talk about. But anyway, the true test, I think, in this is going to come from companies that are claiming that the owners of the company oppose this part of the Obamacare in contraception. So I think that's going to be more of a real test and a more dangerous test than this. I mean, who cares if the nuns don't get contraceptions? Maybe they should, but we already know of other ways that even in the face of AIDS and the millions that are dying in Africa, the church opposes contraception in the form of condoms in Africa. So.
Right, I think you lose your claim to a higher morality when you do that. But let's move on to, we just have one announcement that we're going to introduce our guest. So this show, really doesn't have any money behind it. We're not paid for anything here. But if you like the show, well, I'm not paid. Some people are. No, but for real, if you want to help out, if you think it's a valuable show, if you think bringing in secular authors, talking about a rational-based life, talking about the importance of science, if you think that's helpful for the communities, please send in a donation to Fairfax Public Access. We'll try to put that to good use.
All donations are tax deductible, so please crack open those wallets and send in some money, and make sure that you mention the show when you write it. If you'll see on the screen that you have a way to write the check and make it over $100. It's not gonna make you or break you. Anyway,
one of the things we want to put out a challenge to all atheists. Atheism and skepticism are completely different things, and you have plenty of atheists that believe in all sorts of crackpot ideas. So if you are think that 9/11 was just a setup by our government, if you believe in a whole bunch of alternative medicines that don't have scientific
anti-vaccination,
backing, you're anti-vaccination movement.
Some people are.
Call in and try to make your case. If you don't have a case, maybe you'll learn something. And if you do have a better case than us, maybe we'll learn something. That's something that we do try to be doxastically open, as Peter Boghossian, one of the words he taught me. You try to be open to new information. It's not a crime or a sin to learn something new. That's actually a good thing.
Well, and many of us have became atheists because of that. So we need to extend that to every idea that we have in the world. Every idea is not exempt from scrutiny. So
Right. Don't just scrutinize religion, scrutinize everything. Now, I want to get to our guest. Linda Lascola is a DC-based qualitative researcher. She's the co-author with Daniel Dennett of a really groundbreaking pilot study that was called Preachers Who Are Not Believers. And she's also the co-author of Caught in the Pulpit, Leaving Belief Behind. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We've had Elizabeth Cornwell, Rick Wingrove, David have been talking about you for months, really since the show started, when they started hearing your name. So again, thank you for coming in. Can you first tell us maybe a little bit about both your personal background, in terms of religion, when you came toward atheism, and then about your professional background, since that'll bear on the study?
Sure. I was raised Catholic. I think probably a little different than your situation, in the sense it was a very, very liberal Catholicism, and it was cultural, and it was based more around food and
the best religion.
right, and family gatherings, than really religion. I got religion in Sunday school and in church on Sunday, but I didn't really hear much about it at home. And I, for a brief period, wanted to be a nun, I think like a lot of little Catholic girls do, and it had more to do with...
Even though you can't get contraception?
I wasn't thinking about contraception. This was a long time ago. And I don't think contraceptives even existed then. But I liked the outfit, and it seemed like a romantic thing to do, but that didn't last very long. And it wasn't really very important to me. I didn't think about it very much, but I sort of believed it on the periphery. There's no reason not to believe it. I didn't let it interfere with anything I wanted to do. And didn't really think about it until, very much, until I went to Italy just a few years ago, in 2005. And I saw all the beautiful works of religious art and learned much more about Christian history than I ever had before, and realized that really there is nothing supernatural that was needed for all of this to happen. And I realized that there is a lack in my education, that I had never really studied Christianity the way I had studied and been interested in so many other things. So I started studying it. And when I studied it, I found that really it was like every other religion, based on myths and stories and dogmatism and doctrine. And there wasn't anything, at least for me, to believe in after that.
No fear at all of these thoughts going to hell or anything like that?
No, I realized that I hadn't believed in hell in a long time.
Okay.
I sort of just discarded the things that didn't make any sense to me.
You said in your book that you missed the smells and bells thing, but you didn't miss the authoritarianism that went along with it.
Right.
Can you say something about it? Because we've talked about that on the show before, how the religious mindset might really bear on your life. And it is important. If you think you should bow to authority, you shouldn't question things.
Well, I also like Italian opera. I like all opera, but Italian opera is my favorite. I listened to it growing up. And it's very much the same, really. It's an interesting story, such beautiful music. And that's what Catholicism was to me more than anything else. I'm not saying that's all it was. But I still enjoy the smells and bells. And I went to midnight mass at Christmas, and if I could, I would go.
There's also a sense of community that you have, when you go to this group and people are kind of being nice to each other, and like you said.
Well, I went to an Episcopal church for Christmas Eve, and there's a definite sense of community there. It was one of my old churches, actually. In the Catholic Church, I'll have to say, at least the one I grew up in, there was not much of a sense of community. It was, you have to come on Sunday, and you have to go to Sunday school, and you have to give money. And if you don't, bad things will happen to you.
The money part is really common to all of them.
Well, that happened in the study. Maybe we'll get to that later. One of the comments that one of your study participants made was that it turned out that religion had a lot to do with filling the pews and making sure there was money coming in. And that's a very distressing thing, I guess, for somebody who went into this for the right reasons of just trying to help people and discover the truth.
So let me ask you this before we get into the book. How did you, who came up with the idea for this book, and how did that hatching come to be this?
Well, as it turned, I would say it was my idea, but it was also Dan Dennett's idea, and it was also Richard Dawkins' idea, in the sense that they had thought about this, and I'm sure other people had too in years past. They had known sophisticated clergy people, and they had heard them talk, and couldn't imagine that they could believe some of the stuff that they are supposed to believe. Now, when I did my study of Christianity, I learned the same thing. I learned that when they were in seminary, anyone who gets a master's in divinity, which includes most people in the clergy, they learn all about Christian history. They learned everything I did, and still they went on to be pastors, and I couldn't figure it out at all. And so I became very curious, and because I am a researcher, I wanted to research it. And I actually started just talking to people, some who had been in the clergy for a while, or some who were actively in the clergy. But there's only so far you can go with friends or with people that you're not talking to in a professional relationship. And so I was really eager to do research. And when I read Dan Dennett's book, Breaking the Spell, I said, this is wonderful. Here is a guy that wants to do research on religion. He wants to look at religion the same way Masters and Johnson's looked at sex, and it's way overdue. So I sent him an email. And I said to myself, I'll just bug him till he gets back to me, because I didn't know him at all. But I didn't have to bug him. A couple weeks later, he responded to the email. He said, this is a great idea. And I happened to know that he was coming to Washington for a conference. This is 2007. So I said, well, would you talk with me at the conference? And he did, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and Dave was saying before the show how he really admires that entrepreneurial spirit, that you took your skills, you took your curiosity, you went out and you did something, you contacted some big name, you made it happen, and huge things have resulted from that. And we'll maybe you can tell us a little about the pilot study first, exactly what that was, and then we'll get into its relationship to this book and to the Clergy Project.
Well, we started with a pilot study. We talked to 5 Protestant ministers.
How'd you find them? How'd you get to them?
The reason we did, I'll get to that. The reason we did a pilot study is because we thought it would be difficult finding people. So we didn't want to commit to a large study and not be able to find the people to participate in it. So we said, okay, let's do 5. And we got a grant from an individual who chooses to remain anonymous through Tufts University to conduct the study. Dan Dennett knew Dan Barker. At that time, I didn't know Dan Barker at all. And Dan Barker, head of the Freedom, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, thought that he could help find us people because people would contact him.
That's right. He's an ex-preacher himself.
He's an ex-preacher himself. He wrote a book called Godless. So people, in their desperation, having all the same feelings Dan had, Dan Barker, but not knowing anyone they could talk to, would call him in Wisconsin. He'd find his phone number and call him and want to talk to him. So he had talked to a few people like that along the way. And whenever that happened, then after he'd spoken to me and Dan and we had the study underway, he would say, well, I'm happy to talk with you. There's not much I can do for you besides have this little chat, but there is a study going on. Perhaps you'd like to participate in that. So we found 3 people that way.
Nice.
And we found 2 people through a former pastor of mine. He has passed away now. His name is Jim Adams. He was the pastor of St. Mark's Episcopal Church on Capitol Hill. And he was an open agnostic when we were at church. He would say it from the pulpit.
Wow.
And in the congregation, there were a fair amount of agnostics, including my husband, who's an agnostic. And he's the only reason I ended up at this Episcopal church, because I was very happy not going to church at all. But he wanted to go to church. So Jim Adams helped us find other people. By that time, he had retired, and he was the head of a group called the Center for Progressive Christianity. And the way he assisted was simply by giving me a list of names of people in his organization who lived in the East Coast, and saying that he had what the study was about, and that he had given me their names, but had not told me anything about them. So I contacted a few of those people, and they were liberal Christians. There were Episcopalians and Methodists and Presbyterians and United Church of Christ. And I found three through him as well, and one eventually dropped out of the study.
So these are all personal contacts.
Personal
really.
contacts. And also we went far and wide. I gave the description of the study to a lot of people who said they were interested in helping us out, but they weren't able to.
Now, and just so we have a lot to cover and very little time. So just to move things along, what did you do once you got this group of people? What was your interaction with them? And maybe you can distinguish between some of the regular studies, double-blind, standardized trial that we hear, versus the qualitative research that you were doing.
Well, all qualitative research is in-depth research. It's in-depth conversations. And you have a small, you'll have a discussion guide, which is not a questionnaire. It's more like what this interview is like than what a survey. Right. And you have things that you want to discuss, but you don't go question by question. And if a person says something interesting, or they have a certain look on their face when they say something, and you question it, you doubt what they're saying, you think they have something more to say that they're afraid to say, you can probe them. And I like to think that I'm good at that because my background is a clinical social worker, and as having done qualitative research for over 25 years.
So the book's name is Caught in the Pulpit,
Yes.
Leaving Belief Behind. Whose idea was for that catchy title? I mean, it's great. The picture, having the preacher with the fingers crossed and all that, it's just fantastic.
Right. We worked on that title a long time. It's hard coming up with, not that I've ever done it before, but it's difficult coming up with book titles. And I have
that are not taken already.
Right. And I'll have to credit Dan's wife, Susan, with that. She's the
it's a
main originator of that title.
Perfect.
And I saw one of your participants in the study made some comment about
Yes.
crossing his fingers while he was doing it.
Yes,
the way
that
to
was
deal
Harry.
with the cognitive dissonance of saying one thing.
A superstition?
Yeah. Maybe we can jump to that now. Just talk about, a lot of this book was about, you have these people that spent a lot of their lives learning all about the Bible. They're suddenly struck, wait, all the stuff I was taught as a kid, we know that lots of this isn't true, yet they're now going on to lives of telling other people as if it's true. So how, maybe you can tell us some of the emotional turmoil that
It's a little bit like
caused them.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, well, what you say is accurate. However, that's only part of the story, in the sense that if you're, when you're a child, you are taught simple things usually. Once they go to seminary, they learned that they learn how Christianity was made, and so most people are not naive once they leave seminary. Now, the people who are still what I would call naive are people who some Pentecostal ministers who don't go to seminary at all, or other kinds of fundamentalists who go to Bible schools and they only teach them the Bible. They don't teach them really about the history of Christianity. So now I've lost sight of what your question. You were asking.
Well, kind of some of the turmoil that they have to go through when they realize they go into it with the best of intentions.
Right.
Then they learn all about the history of Christianity, and wait, God didn't write this. Jesus didn't write this. People that lived with Jesus didn't write this.
Apostles
We
didn't
don't know
write
who
it.
wrote this. Mark didn't write the Gospel of Mark. They learn all this stuff, and all of a sudden, they've committed a decade.
Right.
And they're ready to go out there and preach to people.
To
what
invest
they do.
it kind of thing?
Right. For some people, when that happens to them, it happens in just that way. They say, "Oh my God, this isn't the way it happened." But by that time, they're committed. They think, "Well, maybe if I keep at it long enough, my attitude toward it will change." And this information is not all I'm teaching. I didn't go into the ministry just to teach about the Bible. I went in to help people.
Right.
I went in to be with people during the most important and poignant parts of their lives. And I'm not just spending time at the pulpit. And besides, when I am, I can maybe shade the story a little bit. Or instead of talking about things in the Bible, I can say, well, this happened in the Bible, and let's relate it to what's happening today. So they can spend 2 minutes on the Bible and the rest of the sermon on something more practical that's going on today. However, there are other people who don't react the way you say. They're in seminary and they're just fascinated by what they're learning. It's like, wow, I never knew all of this stuff. And they're excited by it. And I don't understand it because I'm not that way, but it makes Christianity more interesting to them, and they want to go out and tell everybody about it, but they still feel a spirituality and a belief in God. And they find that when they get to their parish or their congregation, that's not what the people in the pews are interested in.
I thought that was one of the sad, it's a very poignant book in the stories, and I thought that was one of the saddest parts, is people go into it with good intentions, They learn
Yeah.
this thing, they want to share it, and then you talked about the corruption in the church above
Right.
them not wanting to hear it, and even the parishioners, they just want to hear what they want to hear.
Right.
They're not excited like you that, like the fascination of the universe, or the fascination of how did religions come about. You're suddenly, maybe you can tell what are some of the beliefs that get upturned in seminary, because they're not just peripheral, trivial issues, right? They're about, Jesus is he really God? Some of the
Is he a
things are
myth or
really
not a
big.
myth?
They are taught, it's not so much that, they're taught that the Trinity is a man-made thing. Okay, that there's not, they may be taught that there's no mention of the Trinity in the Bible. They may or may not be taught that. But some other things that they are taught, that the Bible stories don't necessarily mean what the way they're interpreted.
When you talk about, I guess, literalist versus
The
liberal.
lesson that is important is the morality
Right.
that is trying to come across. So,
But for everybody that comes out for all the fundamentalists that are literalists, everybody that comes out essentially of seminary sounds like they have to be, if they're intellectually honest, a liberal, in terms of their reading of it, or
What happens
symbolic.
to a lot of the fundamentalists, and I heard this from fundamentalists and from people who knew fundamentalists in seminary, is that they fight against what they're learning. They fight against the information they're getting about that there's so much mythology involved in it. But they learn the material because they have to pass the classes to get their MDiv and get out and be a preacher. And so they study it, they make good grades, but they throw it all away when they get out.
cognitive dissidence.
Right, well,
And they
that-
preach what they want to preach.
That's very Machiavellian, and that doxastic closure that Peter Boghossian talks about, and they justify it, like, I need to get through so that I can go help people, so I'm going to read it, not really listen or pay attention to it, and move on.
We have we're starting to run low on time a little bit. So let me ask you this. Kind of a two-part question. Have you heard any negative feedback from secular groups at all? Until
secular groups?
From secular groups,
Yeah.
and until yesterday, I looked at the Amazon reviews, and the lowest thing you had was 3 stars. But you just informed me a minute ago that that's changed. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we have a 1-star review, and when I saw it, I thought, this is just earlier
Did your heart
today.
sink when you first saw it? 1 star.
Well, no, actually no, because I'm a researcher. I thought, I wonder why he really hated the book. So I was curious. I couldn't help myself but be curious. So I read it, and it was all about what an awful person Daniel Dennett is. I was sort of disappointed.
Ad hominem.
Yeah.
Didn't mention you.
He didn't mention me at all. I was disappointed about
We
that.
think you're awful, for what it's worth.
Thank you. And then it seemed as though he hadn't read the book. It wasn't clear that he had read the book.
You see that a lot.
Yeah, and so then he had written a lot of other reviews. So I checked him. He had like 10 pages of reviews, and he gave them, almost all of them, 1-star reviews. And they were all books written by people that I really admire, like Steve Pinker, and Peter Hitchens, and
You
Richard
said Dawkins was on there.
Yeah,
you
and
said you
Peter
were in some excellent
Boghossian.
company.
Yeah,
So
so I
really-
feel really great.
I was gonna say, yeah. So if you got a 1 star, that means you did good.
No, we talked before the show that there was some
Right.
expose on the Koch brothers showing how their guy is in there talking to this group of people, saying what we need to do. What I do is I sign up to Amazon, a bunch of different names. I'll quickly go and destroy 100 books, and so if we all do this, we can knock down their ratings. And so truth sort of people that just glance at the ratings and don't do what you did
Yeah.
see. Did this guy mess with every single secular atheist author out there? It can have a harmful effect, and we really need to be cognizant of it and call people out when they're doing that stuff.
Yes, and I would actually encourage people to go to Amazon where you can get the book and read those reviews. And to that, I was tempted myself to respond to them, but it would be better if other people responded to him.
No, I'm planning to. It might be the same guy that I've seen every time when Peter Boghossian came out
Right.
with his book. He gave it a 1 star without reading the book at all, and said, he admitted in there he had not bought the book yet, but he was already giving it a 1 star. So very disingenuous, going on.
And one other thing I wanted you to talk about a little bit, just with your history, is I'd like to draw the distinction between science and pseudoscience. And you and Daniel Dennett made a decision to really go out of your way and say, these are all the limitations of this type of study. This is why you can't generalize it to the whole public. So maybe you
Now,
can tell
for
us.
the record, it wasn't 5 people. It got
that's
expanded.
the-
The
Large
book
study.
is about 35 people,
Okay, so it got
actually,
expanded.
including 3 seminary professors and 3 students of theology. So, and actually, 2 of the ministers that we studied were believing. We wanted to get the perception of believing clergy whose beliefs were very similar to those who considered themselves non-believing. But it was done through Tufts University. We both Daniel Dennett and I had to take the course given by the Interinstitutional Review Board in order for them to know that we qualified to do it. The only thing I learned from that I didn't already know from being a clinical social worker and being a qualitative researcher conducting independent studies for over 25 years, was the history of academic research and how strict they are about the way studies are done to protect the privacy and confidentiality of participants.
Sounds like you learned a lot in that course that they made you take on dealing with humans.
It's a good thing. Dealing with human subjects. It's not only is it a good thing to know, but you have to know that in order to do academic research.
And even in our conversations, I point out, you really do protect that confidentiality.
Absolutely.
There's certain things that you just don't talk about, which is
right.
appropriate.
And everybody in the book has a fake name, and I have to
Right.
I have to train myself, to know them by their fake names only.
So this is great. This book just recently came out. I know there's already great reviews on it. In order to make sure we knew what we were talking about, we rushed and got it and went through it.
Thank you.
It was really hard to put down. It was very interesting, very hard to put down because the stories are such gripping stories. And
it reminds us that these are real people. There can be a tendency, in atheism to look down on these people aren't rational, they're not skeptics. First of all atheists aren't skeptics. We all need to work on that. But also, these are just regular people that this is where their life led. And these stories will remind you these are decent people that aren't out to wreak havoc in the world. And so you really
it
humanize
affects the
it.
families around them also. It's not
Families,
just themselves.
Yeah,
it's the
you really
families.
humanize the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really great. So, I just want to thank you so much for this book and hope that this kind of research continues. And Daniel Dennett calls for more research on
Yes, we're all in favor of
religion.
that.
And so I think this might be, one of the first big studies in the sense of the impact and the shock factor, because a lot of religious people don't think that there are atheist preachers out there, and
they don't want to think about it sometimes. They would
And
rather.
maybe just mention one word about the Clergy Project before we're out of time.
Yes.
That started with just a handful. Where is that now?
There are now over 500 members. I think it's around 550. And although the initial study that Daniel Dennett and I did helped start it, we're not involved in it at all because we're not ex-clergy ourselves.
But that came about because of
Yes.
your study. So it's as a result of it that a lot of people are now benefiting from that being out in the open.
That really makes me feel wonderful.
Isn't it? Great.
All right. I think we are going to cut to break.
Thank you so much
you for joining us.
for
You're
joining
welcome.
us,
My
and
pleasure.
we look forward to seeing you again in the show.
Thank you.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week, the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube. And remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
At NASA right now, scientists and engineers are working every day to help humans learn how to better care for our home, so that we never have to leave. NASA has a fleet of satellites around the planet that keeps track of climate change and studies how humans are affecting the planet. NASA has a ton of geniuses, and all of them are working for a future that has a healthy Earth in it. Like when NASA helped find the hole in our ozone layer so we could fix it before the problem got out of control, NASA is doing its part. We have to do ours. This is our home. To learn more about how NASA is keeping an eye on Earth, visit www.nasa.gov/Earth.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue. But the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that! That's disgusting! Oh, poop already! You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Welcome back. As you can see, we have changed guests on you. We wanted to bring a couple of different guests, and although we had tons and tons of things more to talk about with Linda Lascola, right now we're going to be bringing you for the next few minutes, the next half hour, Faisal Saeed Al-Mutar. I can't say very well, but I'm going to read his description because there's so much going on in his life. He's a very young Iraqi writer, public speaker, web designer, and most important, a social activist living currently in the United States. And Faisal has become well known for his advocacy of freedom of thought, science education, reason, and the free market of ideas and economy. He's the founder of the Global Secular Humanist Movement, Secular Post, and he is the Public Relations Director for Global Secular Organizing and Strategy, otherwise known as the GSOS, which is, we're going to talk about that. Faisal has also been featured in the Washington Post, Yahoo Voices, Skeptic Magazine, Patheos Blog, Houston Chronicle, Wissen Rocket Magazine in Germany, and has been called one of the most influential humanists in the world by Better Life Project. He's the contributor to different publications, including National Post, Big Think, the Richard Dawkins Foundation, Secular World, and many others. He is a member of the Speakers Bureau at the Center for Inquiry, as well as the Secular Student Alliance. And yet he has a lot of time to go around and speak to a lot of places, as I found out last year and as his schedule shows this year. And recently he found out that he's going to be a fellow at the Harvard Humanist Community, which is a very honorable organization that has been around for a while and is really interesting. So,
are you embarrassed to have done so much in your 20s already?
22.
Well,
you make us look bad.
it's how you define goals. I think is the thing. Is how would you? It's like if you define your goal as walking 500 miles. And you go only 100 miles, you will not be satisfied of yourself. So I'm not really much satisfied. I think that there is more to be done.
So your goals are just way too high.
And that's what I'm planning to do. I call last year as the year of pushing things forward. I mean, coming new to the United States. I mean, I arrived in March, so I've been about 9 months, 10 months in the country.
Wow. Where were you before then?
So I left Iraq in 2009, September 2009. I went first to Lebanon. I was actually planning to go to the UK to complete my education and actually escape Iraq. I mean, it was a mix. Is that I wanted to find a positive way to escape Iraq other than applying for asylum.
Tell people your backstory too, because most people probably aren't aware of why you were leaving Iraq and what
Yeah,
happened.
I mean, it started. I mean, I would say 2007, which I refer to as the worst year in my life. I call 2013 as the best. So you can see the resume has been pretty much created in less than 9 months. But is the year in which my eldest brother, was killed, which is one of the reasons I got the asylum here in the United States. And my best friend was killed because he was mistaken by me. That was a direct death threat, and as well as my cousin. So it was a year, and I think the most difficult thing with that, in terms of my activism, was that I think the same case for American families and everywhere around the world is that when my eldest brother was killed, my family turned paranoid, I would say. So it was very difficult for me to share.
I wouldn't call it paranoia. I would call it reasonable fear.
I think just like the term Islamophobia. I mean, it's reasonable to be fearful of Islam. So it's the same thing it's reasonable to be fearful of the situation over there. I mean, the thing about Iraq, I mean, is also, I mean, that's something that always get. I mean, I've received so many death threats. So, like when I applied for asylum, it's like the guy said, "Oh, 5 is enough. 5 is enough." You know, because my list is pretty long. Being secular activist, I mean, is not actually one of them. Is not considered the reason to apply for asylum, no matter how many people get killed because of that. And that's one of the projects I'm actually will be working on with Dave Silverman, the leader of American Atheists, the president of American Atheists, is that. Well, for example, being a Christian in Iraq, there are so many Christians organizations in the United States that kind of sponsor Christians and help. So that gonna make, when people say they are persecuted because they are Christians, they have a sponsorship over here. It makes it very easy route for them to come to the United States. Well, people like me or secularists and activists, who are actually, there are many who are stuck. Is that
so for years, right? I was shocked when reading your history. It took you years to get asylum.
Yeah, I mean, it took years for the whole thing. I mean, at first, as I said, I wanted to make it in a positive. I did not want to make it asylum. I wanted to go to United Kingdom for education and stay there technically, or fly over there. But I was rejected for economical purposes. And generally, the United Kingdom do not accept Iraqis. I mean, it's very difficult when you have an Iraqi passport to move around. I mean, even within the Middle East. If you go to Lebanon, and that's the country that I left afterward, I mean, you need to have $2,000. I need to show it in cash to the officer in the airport, tell him, you know what, and that's for visiting only. I mean, if you want to go for education, you have to have more. For the UK, they needed to have a £20,000 for the first 6 months. The first 6 months, and if you plan to do like 3-year degree, they wanted £50,000 or something.
You weren't being persecuted for being secular, or were you?
I was. I mean, it's just a mix of things, to be honest. I mean, it's a pretty. I mean, hard for me to explain what was the main reason, but the main reason why I gained asylum here in this country was because the closest member of my family was killed by Al-Qaeda, and that kind of put all the family members in danger. Obviously, all the reasons followed up of, I mean, I'm actually kind of lucky. I mean, some people say, oh, 2 or 3 years are long to get that asylum, but technically it gets longer for some people.
I mean, it's not like they heard you were at risk for being killed and they snapped you up. That's 2 or 3 years where you could have been killed, right?
Yes,
three people died.
These were very difficult years of my life. I mean, of all the places that I've been to, I've been to Lebanon, then I've been to Malaysia and Singapore during this period, and these countries, leave aside that they never can be called home, they are never secure places to be, because they have every incentive to kick you out from the country. In Lebanon, I've got so many difficulties of keeping myself staying over there. And they have special rules for Iraqis, and it's like you have to stay 3 months maximum, and you have to leave the country and come back. So I had to go back to Iraq for leave aside that I was under threat, and then come back again.
Let me ask you something. All this activism that you're doing, it seems to me that a lot of this activism is being done in the United States, in a country that already enjoys a lot of freedom, a lot of protection and everything. My question to you is, you just mentioned a project that you're going to be working with American Atheists in order to provide this. Are there any other projects? Are you in contact with the secular people in the different countries, or just in Iraq, or in the Middle East in general? I mean, you're seen over here as a Middle Eastern man who was able to survive, apostasy and so on, and see you as a leader of, like it or not, of the Arab world, and when it comes to secularism. Do you see yourself that way? Do you see yourself, are you planning to work in things focusing in the Middle East, taking advantage that you speak Arabic and know the culture?
Yes, just to be clear, I've been an activist long before I came to the United States. Global Secular Humanist Movement was started 2009. So, before that, I created a group called Iraqi Humanist Youth. So, I've been an activist for, I've been very, well, in terms of speaking appearances, I'm doing it here more in the States. But when it comes to, me personally, the way that I look at humanism, one of the best things about it, I think, is that it's leaderless. And I also follow, even if I wasn't, I follow Abraham Lincoln quote, is that a leader is a person who creates more leaders. So technically, I'm not trying to take credit for things. I've been, as you know, been activist for in Lebanon. I've got to know some activists in Iraq. I'm still in touch.
What's your definition of activist?
Well, a person who tried to change things and inspire other people to change things. So you don't need to be only the person who's doing it. Most of the projects that I've started, Secular Post, was that I wanted to allow people from countries that have limited freedom of speech, and that's one of the people. So I know the experience of living in a country like Iraq, and you want to publish a new article, and all the newspaper reject you because that's so secular, and we don't want you.
And worse than that, you're putting yourself at risk.
So what I wanted to do is to allow people to publish things anonymously, but get their message across to the world. So I did not only. So for example, you can see an article of which I think I always mention in my speeches, of a woman in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, which is the hub of Islam, who is an atheist, and came to Global Secular Humanist Movement, became a member, and she shared her story and translated into 5 languages with the people who I work with. So it got published in so many newspapers around the world for people to know what's going on and to be heard. And as well as people use Global Secular Humanist Movement, which is pretty much focused online, because I'm a very big fan of technology myself, is that some people are in Egypt and they're all secularists. So they don't know anyone secularist around. They joined the page and contacted me, and I created an event and I brought them together. So they can change things in their own country.
Are you doing these things in English, or are you doing them in Arabic?
Most languages. We have now. I personally, I'm technically taking leadership in so many stuff, but I have a team of volunteers who are working with me. I know English, Arabic, and some French. I know some Middle Eastern languages because they are connected to each other. So it comes to Pakistan, for example, which I have very big focus on. And that's one of the countries that keep me awake at night, and that's actually it's, not surprisingly, it keeps Obama awake at night too, because the level of religious extremism over there is very high, and it's a failed state. Plus, they have nuclear arms.
So, can you talk about the level of extremism here? Like, we complain all the time about the Christian right and the horrible things they're doing in the Tea Party. You have a completely different view of, I've heard you say our religious extremists are Middle Eastern moderates, and so give us your view on that.
I actually sometimes joke about this. I say getting stoned in America is different something else than getting stoned in the Middle East. So it is. I think it was Sam Harris who actually mentioned that what we call religious fundamentalists in America, are considered the moderates in Islam. There's a huge difference, in my opinion. I think that's something not shared by many, that Islam is unique religion. They're all religions. They're all based on the same illusion, but when it comes to Christianity versus Islam, is that the Christianity, even though it was created in the Middle East, but can be considered a Western religion. And especially the Age of Enlightenment, which is what most my heroes' inspirations come from, have played a very major role in reforming Christianity.
Right.
And
Christianity now is different than it was.
Different than it was in the 16th century or 15th century when Galileo was. So there is a huge time gap between Islam and Christianity. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, is that the difference in religion is that it comes that Islam, the Quran was written during the life of the Prophet. it is more likely to take it literally than the Bible is. I mean, majority of Christians agree that the Bible was written after Jesus.
All the many versions there are.
Yes,
of the Bible.
and so it leaves there's more room for skepticism in Christianity than there is room for skepticism in Islam. So there are more people, Muslims, who take the Islam literally.
Do more Muslims know the Quran a lot better than more Christians knowing the Bible?
Yes, because and also the Quran. I mean, I've read both books. The Quran has more direct language, and it's pretty easy to understand. And
it's written in Arabic.
And it's written, it's written in Arabic, which is my language, so I can understand it well. And I am kind of different than many people come from the Middle East. I'm not an ex-Muslim. I mean, I had a huge interest in philosophy since like when I was 8 or 9 years old, and during this time, most of the internet was restricted, so I had to hack a password to get access to website, which as soon as I came to America, I donated to them a lot. It's called archive.org, and they have publications of philosophy, since the Greek philosophy until Western philosophy of Bernard Russell. So when I started reading this stuff, I was a deist for a long time until I became about 18, 17 years old. So I've never been a Muslim. So because of readings of philosophy, I look at religion, and Islam is taught at public schools in Iraq. I mean, it's forced. So you have to know Islam. I mean, even if you don't want to know, or if you are Christian, you are exempted. But while I was born, quote unquote, a Muslim, because my parents are Muslim, so I had to go through it. So you're forced to learn about Islam. But I've never been actively believing, because I thought of God as like the supreme intelligence, because I thought like the philosophers like Plato and Socrates and as the prophets of God, which is kind of a sophisticated point of view, and also inspired by like Thomas Paine, his book The Age of Reason, which is one of my favorites. So I've always thought of God as so intelligent that he could not write something as ridiculous as don't masturbate, you know? I mean, I could not comprehend that, like, this wonderful universe.
So now we know where they lost you in that religion, huh?
It's funny that you mentioned Thomas Paine as one of your heroes, and I bet here in America, despite everything he did to help with our founding, he's probably very little known. He was shunned. I think 6 people went to his funeral. He was an outcast.
And I consider he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was still a British citizen.
I mean, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine. I mean, most of the founding fathers were deists.
Because we have to understand that at that time there was no theory of germ. Then there was no Darwin yet. I think if those people knew what we know,
if they knew Darwinism, they would probably be comfortable.
Yeah, I think deism of age of enlightenment is what atheism is now. But also, I mean, there is so much like correlation. I mean, both deists and atheists believe that reason is the way to go. Right. So, I mean, the concept of God in deism is the natural God. So it's not really the God that watches people all the time and send people to hell and things of that sort. I mean, it was the God that I believed in was like this mega scientist.
Deists were very open, and that whole learning thing, like atheism isn't a dogmatic thing about hating God. It's an outgrowth of skepticism with religion. So a lot of those Enlightenment guys would be here.
So let me ask you, the toughest question you probably will get is, how do you see, and I know saying the Middle East is like when people said Latin America, there are many countries, many cultures, and everything. But just for a lack of a better word, what do you think is an approach to secularizing the Middle East, that whole area? Because regardless of the country, it seems to be a lot of radical countries there, like Saudi Arabia and Iran. What do you think should be the way to secularize in the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, that's the hardest question.
And while you're at it, how can we change, lead to gold?
Yes, I mean, I think it's a very important question. I think that always, I mean, here is my way, and here's what I think, because I'm a result of it. When Saddam Hussein was gone, as a result of the US intervention, the internet became accessible to people. Now, in the 21st century, if you are living in a small town and you can still use your small iPhone to access Dawkins' book, and to know things that you are no longer enclosed by the environment you're living
So
in.
knowledge and education.
Yes.
Access to knowledge.
Access to knowledge became so much easier. Especially, I mean, I'm trying to bring a 21st century solution. I think that there's a correlation between the more knowledge you have, the more skepticism you have of religion. So we should encourage, and I think it's a solution that must come from the inside first, from inside the people in the Middle East. What I call an American push is that we should encourage people and give them resources for them to read. I think one of the best wonderful projects, if somebody can start, and that's a business plan for somebody, is to start a translation business. And get
translating is difficult work.
It is difficult work. I mean, I know people who translated the God Delusion in Arabic, and also so many books in regarding philosophy, and like people who translate Bernard Russell and stuff of that sort. I mean, we need more of that. And also what's need to be done, there are actually foundations now working in Iraq that I support, and I still know some people there, is to encourage the culture of reading. We do have a very, because of war and because of things of that sort, people are very much interested to know about things. I mean, lack of interest is something, I mean, we have a very depressed society in some sense because of what moms worry about is, will their children get back? Will they get killed if they go to school or not?
Yeah.
You know, it's like nobody's thinking,
then
I mean,
You need to get out of that barbarism before you can worry about the intellectual.
you need to put food on the table too. I mean, it's not that there was a new article was published, I think it was Alternate, that atheism is luxury for the wealthy, which is kind of a very stupid article to begin with. But I think that, I mean, having more peaceful life can lead somebody to ask these big questions.
Absolutely.
But when you are enclosed, your life is all about, will I get back alive when I go to high school?
Well, we have mostly, in psychology, you have mostly a hierarchy of needs that say you have to take care of certain needs before you can do the higher thinking. And certainly atheism and questioning religion, which it's a social virus we're brainwashed with as children, that requires an effort to do. It's not something that is natural.
I also would like to put Wi-Fi as the needs in the 21st century. I mean, that's the first thing I ask when I go to a hotel. Do they have Wi-Fi? I don't ask about hot water, actually. It's all about, I mean, it's... So that is actually, I think, one of the solutions. I mean, I definitely think that secularism will bring peace in the Middle East. I mean, we can go to question.
Yeah, I wanted to in the very beginning, because again, we have so little time. Hopefully we'll have you back sometime because you guys have so much to say. You had brought up Islamophobia in the very beginning, and that's been a frequent topic recently. Can you give your view? From the inside, maybe it carries a little different weight than what we say.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why this word has been pretty much Muslims have this concept that that their religion is so awesome that cannot be criticized and is so immune from criticism. There is no denial, in my opinion, that there is phobia, there is some hatred against Muslims by illogical people, and most of that comes from extremist Christians. But Muslims have this, so they have this concept of making the religion immune from criticism, and that's one of the problems why it's not getting reformed. And that's something that the conservatives there want to keep. So any criticism of Islam is labeled as Islamophobia, and and what they also did, and while America and Western world is kind of obsessed with the word racist, it's like nobody wants to call racist. So what they have done is something very successful marketing strategy, is that they linked Islam to race.
Right.
And anytime you criticize Islam, you're labeled as racist and bigot, despite the fact that the majority of Muslims are not from the Middle East. They're from Indonesia, in Pakistan, in India. I mean, the Middle East, yes, it's where Islam started, but it's not
the majority, right?
I mean, there are Muslims who are white in Turkey and Iran. There are Muslims who are black. It's nothing. It's an ideology. But what they did is that, what they want to do is you have to have something other than having a genuine criticism of Islam. You have to have some inner hatred. Right. You have to have hate us because the way we look.
Right. And it's hard because there's genuine bigotry.
But that's the thing when people talk about Islamophobia, and like when a Muslim, I tell them, how about infidel phobia and atheist phobia that is in the Middle East? There are 9 countries that execute people for being atheist. All of them are Muslim.
Right.
All of them are Muslim dominated. Let's talk about atheist phobia. Right. Let's talk about the people who are getting actually killed. Which Western country that kills people for being Muslims?
Yeah.
No Western country, no liberal democracy does that. But let's talk about atheist phobia, and that's actually the best way to shut them down.
We have I want to touch on something before because we have about 3 minutes left.
Sure.
You're the Public Relations Director for Global Secular Organizing
and Strategy. Yes.
And Strategy. Tell us a little bit about that. What is the purpose of this group? As the public relations person, you probably have the 3 minute, the 30-second elevator speech.
It is. It's a pragmatic plan to get secularists organized and have a powerful force in the politics.
Politics. That's the key. That's the key.
Yes, that's the key point. I think that what secularists. I think that there is a huge rise of secular thinking and critical thought within the United States and within the world. So it's a global organization, but we are starting in the United States. And Mr. Sean Felcrath, he's a friend. I don't call him my boss. So. He has a great experience in organizing, and he's been a politician, and he's been in Congress in Maine, and we're working as allies. I've pretty much been on the educational part of secularism, but I think that it's time for secularists to organize and be a powerful force in the U.S. Congress, in DC, and all over the world. And the action plan is available on globalsecular.org, and people can volunteer and check out the plan, and if they have any questions, they can contact me as contact@globalsecular.org, and we have the contact form as there if you are. And Richard Dawkins is speaking at our event in Iowa in 12th of April.
Who designed this plan? Who designed the plan? Was this done by a committee, a person?
Yes, it's done by a committee, and Sean is the
head of the committee.
Is the head of the committee. We have Daniel Dennett in our advisory board.
Excellent.
And I think
yeah, we've heard of it. He's hopefully going to come here.
It's like Daniel Dennett
and talk about with Sean Faircloth. I know in one of your interviews you said you really like working for him. That he's very good at getting boots on the ground and very practical minded, and really figuring out a way to make an impact.
That's the reason why he is the closest ally for me in the secular movement. Is that I'm the type of person who likes to get stuff done. Right. There are so many, like here in DC, there are like groups of Muslims coming from ex-Muslims, etc., etc. I refer to them as Alcoholic Anonymous. Is that actually, I'm supportive of having support groups within the United States for atheists who want to talk about stuff, but it's time to get stuff done. It's time to create a rational government that,
Well, you talk about a human. I know you said something about making a humanist, like why humanism is so important, and getting that into politics and the values of humanism.
I think more of the applications of humanism as well as the body of thought. So we need a rational government and rational foreign policy.
Well, you're going to have to tell us about that next time. We'd love to have you back. We're just about out of time here. We have 2 great guests. We want to thank Linda and Faisal for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It was really great hearing you, and we'll have you for sure again.
Thank you.